Welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. It's a Europod with title races as far as the eye can see. Barcelona's high line continues to excite, frustrate and baffle, but they get the job done to close the gap to Real Madrid at the top of La Liga to 3 points. So Real Madrid still top, but a goalless draw against Rayo Vallecano, who were the first team to keep a clean sheet against Real Madrid in the league. And that was a follow-up to their defeat to Liverpool in the Champions League. They're fairly demanding fans, aren't they, Sid? So how has this gone down?
Wow, this has been a real release the hounds moment. It's incredible how quickly everyone's gone for Xabi Alonso, and how quickly very specific people have gone for Xabi Alonso, which are the people who tend to be the harbingers of doom, who tend to be the people who've how do I put this? Who've been guided into a certain direction to have a word. And of course, the part of the problem is that someone like Xabi Alonso knows that. He knows that this doesn't come purely in a vacuum. He knows that this isn't just a few fans totally losing their heads. And I think I think you see that in him a little bit. You see that sense of, okay, I can, this is more than just criticism. It does seem a little bit nuts to me, but it's true that Real Madrid, there hasn't been a kind of a flow about them. There hasn't been an excitement about them. And I think there is a little bit of a sense of Alonso trying to build a structure and an idea that maybe some of the players don't entirely buy into.
Has he tried to change a lot then as he's come in?
There is an idea of them playing higher up the pitch. There is an idea of there being, if you like, a clear identity to how they play. Whereas before, I mean, there was that great line from Jude Bellingham, which he suggested as something that made Real Madrid really good, but it actually sounded like a criticism of the manager, which we play off the cuff. And I think what Alonso doesn't want them to do is to play off the cuff. He wants it to be a structure. And of course, in theory, everyone completely buys into this. Yeah, absolutely. Because if this team was well organised with the quality of players and so on, but of course, there's a quality of players, some of whom quite like playing off the cuff and quite like that degree of freedom. And so there is a change there. I'll be honest with you. A few weeks ago, I was thinking Madrid are going to be boringly good this year. They're going to structure games. They're going to be on top. They're never really going to give other teams a chance. And they might not always be fantastically exciting, but they're going to win loads. And then they got battered by Atletico Madrid in the derby. They won the Clasico, so everyone was happy about that, but they weren't particularly good at Anfield. They weren't that good this weekend. And there is a slight sense that it's not as exciting as it was. And then there's the other thing, which is the kind of the personal relationships. And of course, the thing that kind of overshadowed the Clasico. They beat Barcelona. This should have been a moment where everyone says, yeah, here it is. This is the team. For the first time in 4 Clasicos, they've beaten Barcelona. But they had that moment when Vinicius went off and actually absolutely went at Alonso. And that doesn't look good. And it doesn't look good partly because it's then played out in public.
I think that when it comes to the European context, and obviously that game against Liverpool, and observing it from the perspective of someone who's watching the Italian teams a lot, I think we've certainly got to a point where I don't know whether to call it realism or an inferiority complex, but I think Italian teams, even when Inter are going to Champions League finals, there is an expectation that English clubs, because they are richer, they are wealthier, they are stronger, they're supposed to be on top. And when you're not able to beat them, it's almost a bit more expected. Now, Madrid sit in this different position, don't they? Because even though the Premier League is outspending the rest of Europe by 3-1 at this point, Madrid are the one team that are the exception that can sit atop the money league and can bring in these huge numbers. And I just wonder how much in that context, I suppose, like how the Liverpool performance is viewed, Liverpool who aren't even playing that well in the Premier League at the moment, and how much that just was like a real shake to the confidence of the club that actually, okay, hang on, but when we went and played the big boys from the other school, it was a bit different.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. I mean, one of them is, and this feeds into what we were talking about before about the kind of the idea of people criticizing Real Madrid. One of them is the idea that Madrid haven't yet played well in the big games. So you have the Atletico Madrid defeat where they lose 5-2. They have the Liverpool defeat where they only lose 1-0, but you look at the number of saves from Courtois and you think, oof, that could be 3 or 4. You have the Club World Cup game against PSG where they lose 4-0. And then you win the Clasico. And one of the big things about the Clasico was everyone said, here we go, this is a big game that Real Madrid have won. But at the same time, it comes in the context of Barcelona having players out, Barcelona not playing very well. And then so you get this post-Anfield, you get this feeling that, could it actually be that it was more because Barca aren't that good than because Madrid
Mm.
really were, and that there's a reality. And then there's the broader context, which is that Premier League thing you're talking about. I haven't got the figure in front of me, but I think I'm right in saying that in 7 Premier League against La Liga team games this season, it's been 6-1 to the Premier League, I think. And you're right, Real Madrid are the ones that should break that trend, but there's a much, much broader context here. And this speaks to the game in Miami. It speaks to the Super League project, which, bear in mind, was driven by Florentino Perez. And in the background in all of that, and actually said explicitly for the first time, I think, by Javier Tebas around the Miami game, is the understanding that if we don't move, the Premier League is going to be the de facto Super League. Now, in theory, Madrid and Barcelona are always separate from that. But one of the reasons they wanted the Super League is they wanted to lock in that power before it starts to get chipped away at. And Madrid are conscious of that. And there is this thing, the thing is, it sometimes gets framed slightly differently. It's not just here's the Premier League running away from us. It's here's the Premier League where you can have state-owned clubs, where you can have massive foreign investment. And of course, Madrid and Barcelona are member-owned clubs. And so one of the background discussions is that idea of, what if we change the model? What if we invited foreign investment in some ways? And there's an AGM coming up for Real Madrid, as there always is just around Christmas time. And I think it's perfectly plausible that Florentino Perez presents a project for a new structure of ownership at the club to invite in that foreign investment as part owners.
Hasn't he actually already said that, Sid, that, I mean, or is it just leaks at the moment?
It was funny because it was before, I think it was before last year's AGM. There were a couple of newspaper pieces saying Florentino's going to announce this new model, and then he didn't. And he thought, oh, this is one of those cases of test the water, see what people think, and then, but there's no doubt that Madrid are looking into it, and that there will be, and there was a suggestion from Florentino about how we structure the club, but it wasn't as direct as saying, right, we're no longer member owned. I think this year we might actually get some meat on the bones there. I think we might get a proposal, which would be about bringing in foreign investment, and then of course it would have to be voted through. But Florentino's control of Real Madrid is such that it will get voted through, and no one really knows the mechanics of it. I mean, a very simple question. I've often thought this: when you reach a privatization process of any business, in this case, Real Madrid is owned by its members. So if you're going to go and allow someone to buy into the club, what do all the members get a dividend? Do they get to sell their shares? What are their shares worth?
I mean, they could go for a kind of à l'allemande model in which you do have like...
I think that's the idea.
Bayern has done that. Or, for example, Hertha, you have got a holding company which is completely separate from the sporting club, and in which you can have foreign investors and the rest of it. The other thing as well, the membership, it's only a small proportion of them who actually vote, don't they? So, it's the ones who are in Florentino's pockets already. So he could push it through if he wanted to.
Oh, 100%. So that everyone votes in theory in presidential elections, but there haven't been presidential elections for, how long is it now? Off the top of my head, I'm thinking 12, 13 years. What happens at the AGMs is you have, if you like, representative members. And as you say, the representative members, it's largely controlled by the club. There's almost no way that anything doesn't get through that AGM. Now, Florentino could propose changing the name to FC Barcelona in Madrid, and it would get through.
That would be great.
I mean, it would be highly amusing, but it's not going to happen.
Let's move on to Barcelona. They beat Celta Vigo 4-2, means they're 3 points behind Real Madrid. Producer Joel said that he felt when the camera reveals the Barcelona defence for Celta's first goal, he thought it was the midfield. I mean, this is a high line. Sid, and we saw that against Club Brugge. And I'm wondering about, did Hansi Flick, did he kind of posit the Ange defence without maybe mate, or I don't know what he'd say, that it's just how we are?
Yeah, he doesn't say mate, no, sadly. It'd be quite good if he did sort of morph into that. I think Hansi Flick actually said something, I think it was, you know what, I'm trying to remember if it was the pre-game press conference or post-game. I think it was pre-game. And he was asked about this high line, which of course has become the focal point of everything. And one of the reasons it's a focal point of everything is because it's so visibly, obviously there. You know, you can't not see it. And I think Hansi Flick's argument actually is, you lot don't see it. You see the line, but you don't see the actual point. You don't see the wood for the trees, for want of a better phrase. But before the game, he'd been asked about it. He said, yeah, we have a problem with dropping too deep sometimes. Essentially, he said, at times. So, you're what? But post-game, he had a sort of a bit of a giggle, and he said, I was going to say something about experts and ex-pros, but I don't think I will, because there's enough noise around this already. Now, Hansi Flick's point, and here we go, I'm going to risk making myself look stupid here. I'm going to back him a little bit. Because I don't think it's as simple as saying, there's the line. And I do think we see the line. And it's not necessarily the fact of playing a high line that's the problem. I think it's a fact of not executing it very well, not timing it as well as they did last year, not putting the pressure on people like they did last year, allowing people to play passes when last year they didn't even allow them to play the pass. And so the fact that the line's there never resulted in, or very rarely resulted in the ball going through them. Why? Because they weren't allowing that pass to be played. And when the pass was played, they timed it right and they were catching people offside. The example for me, which is perfect on this, is last year's Clasico against Real Madrid. The first one of the season, the Barcelona won 4-0. We were thinking, wow, they're living dangerously. They're under pressure. Real Madrid are going to score 10 here because Real Madrid kept on running through. Barca caught them offside 12 times. Now, it's tempting, of course, to look at that and say, cool, you were lucky because you kept catching them offside. Or you could say, do you know what? You're really good at this. And so Barcelona's argument would be, it might look like we're vulnerable, but actually what we're doing is protecting ourselves from the vulnerability by playing this way. Now, what's happening this year is they're not doing it very well. And it is true, there's no two ways about it. It's true that when you watch a game and you see the same chance happen again and again and again, there is a bit of you thinks, just pull the line back, man. It's not that hard. But I think Flick is entitled to say that actually we're being a bit simplistic when we look at it purely in terms of where the line is positioned.
So we went for you've never played the game rather than that's just the way we are, mate.
I think he went for we're not doing some of the things right and we need to improve that. But yeah, and also there was that line a little bit Ange ball in that he was sort of saying things, this is the way we play and we're not going to change that and this is what we want to do. And to be fair, they did win a treble last year doing this. For all the flaws, they won quite a lot of football matches.
Yeah, no, that's fair riposte, I'd say. Marcus Rashford with a couple of assists. 37-year-old Lewandowski making Harry Kane look like a wunderkind with a hat trick. I guess my question is, we're talking about investment and things like that. Barcelona just seem to just fashion up more levers, and they have this embarrassment of riches. I mean, but how is this viewed? Because I just wonder. I was making the comparison with Manchester City. We're saying, when are we going to see what's going to happen here? Are they just going to kind of get away with it and not too many questions are asked about how they're actually doing this?
It's right. It's such a broad question that we could be here all day. I mean, the argument that there's two slightly different things, and one, of course, is your financial position in reality, what you can do, what money you've got, who you can bring in. The other is what you can do in terms of complying with La Liga's financial fair play rules. And I think it's a really important point that needs to be made, certainly to kind of a UK or a non-Spanish audience, which is to say the big difference with the way that financial fair play is applied in Spain is in Spain it's applied ahead of the event. So you're not fined or punished for breaking the rules. There is a limit put in place, and if you can't comply with that limit, we won't let you register the player. You might have already gone and bought him, but we won't let you register him. Now, this is where the debate comes in with Barcelona. So, but Barcelona are finding ways of registering players because they're challenging it, or they're taking advantage of loopholes, or taking advantage of rules. So, for example, signing a player because Ter Stegen gets injured. If the injury is over 4 months, you're allowed to use that money in accountancy terms to pay for another player. And so last year, for example, you had the injury of Andreas Christensen, which is what allowed them to sign Dani Olmo, but only until the winter. And then they had to find another way of signing him. And then they went to what's essentially the sports ministry and said that this is wrong. And the sports ministry said, yeah, okay, then he can play. And so the short answer to your question is, what does people think? Is that people who are in favour of Barcelona are saying, well, these rules are rubbish, aren't they? They're really restrictive for everybody. And people who are against Barcelona are going, look at that lot cheating again. And so, and this, unfortunately, is the nature of everything in Spain. I think there is a much broader question. I think there are some doubts. I think it's probably worth saying that the levers, there's this idea that this is the example I always use, and I don't want it to be an example that kind of justifies everything or lets Barcelona off the hook. But there is this idea that says, well, Barcelona always get away with it. They always get the players. There's never any punishment. They always get the players they want. Yeah, they did lose a guy called Leo Messi because they couldn't pay for him.